This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
I want to welcome you to a very special episode of Real Talk. You know, every single weekday, live streaming at 8:30 Mountain, 10:30 Eastern, or whenever, on demand, we talk news, politics, and pop culture with the newsmakers. We say the movers and the shakers across the country and around the world on the issues, the stories that matter most to you. And as we approach our 1,000th episode of the show, hard to believe, Johnny Infamous, intrepid producer here on Real Talk, we thought, as a fun exercise, we would take a look at the top 10 most notable, newsworthy moments that happened live during interviews or during conversation right here on the show. And so we present today a very special episode of the show entitled They Said What? The top 10 all-time newsworthy moments on Real Talk coming at you in 30 seconds. First, we want to let you know that this episode is presented by Alberta's top online real estate school. If you're looking around you and seeing folks in real estate careers set their own hours, enjoy unlimited earning potential, and help folks buy or sell that perfect property, if you're thinking of a career in real estate, you're going to want to start at Relo. That's RELO.ca, where they boast high exam pass rates, winning webinar and tutorial content. The best part about it, flexible online learning that doesn't stop after they've helped you prepare for your exam and get your license. No, you've got industry experts ready to help you make your way through those first few steps as you forge that real estate career of your own. The promo code Ryan100 knocks $100 off the Alberta residential and commercial real estate bundles. Save a couple of $100 today with the promo code Ryan100, all one word, at Relo.ca. Well, through our first 3 years and a bit on the show, we have enjoyed every single time that political commentator and longtime broadcaster Supriya Dwivedi's joined us on the show. It was on September 21st of 2023 when we were talking to Supriya about India and Canada and media coverage around the strained relationship between the two nations. And it was during that episode, our number 10 most noteworthy, newsworthy moment on the show, that she helped us coin a brand new hashtag.
There's been increasing backsliding of India under Modi. There's been decreasing press freedoms during that time, and the disinformation operations that are run either by just like Indian right-wing chuds on social media, or like more coordinated, sophisticated campaigns are becoming a lot more brazen and are becoming a lot, quite frankly, just better. And I'm putting that in air quotes, from a prevalent side. And a lot of those talking points end up getting picked up by our mainstream media, as well as right-wing outlets who allow their hate boner for the prime minister to cut off all circulation to their brain.
Hate boner.
The hate boner cutting off circulation to brain moment was certainly one that had the internet a flutter, a Twitter, you might say. And lost in all this hate boner talk was the right-wing chuds. That she
I
opened
was going to say,
I felt like when she dropped that one, that was like her pulling the pin. You could hear the pin from the grenade just sort of like hit the floor.
I had to look it up. I was like, what's a chud?
You learn something in every single interview. So we haven't talked to Supriya in quite some time since she's accepted a role as a senior advisor in the Prime Minister's office. But once that gig wraps up, not saying, just saying, we'll look forward to getting Supriya back on the show.
And just for our listeners, chud means weak and feeble.
C-H-U-D. Chud. Our number 9 moment, the moment where they said what and stopped the presses. for a moment or two, came on March 26th of 2024 amid the Alberta NDP leadership race. Gil McGowan, notable Labour leader in the province, throws his hat into the ring and, in a way, kind of directly almost, compares himself to Alberta's greatest premier.
Sometimes people say, Gil McGowan, radical socialist. What I'm suggesting is that we actually take a leaf from our past here in Alberta. In particular, what our province needs is its next Lougheed.
Are you the next Lougheed?
Well, I would like to be. I'll be honest. Okay, because
what do you and Peter Lougheed have in common? Serious question.
Well, in 2 words, industrial policy. When he formed what is arguably the best government that this province ever had.
I would say inarguably.
Inarguably. In the 70s, we were at a crossroads. Alberta was facing the prospect of running out of conventional oil and gas. And his answer was the oil sands and petrochemicals, but he understood that the change had to happen faster than the market could do. In 2024, as a result of the unfolding global energy transition, we're at a similar crossroads, and we need to learn the lessons of Lougheed and actually pivot towards new opportunities.
So that was Gil McGowan, who shortly after that, to be accurate, shortly after launching his leadership bid, withdrew from the leadership race.
Yeah.
And he told us exactly why. He came back on the show after that. People can check our archives. And basically said there was the next big chunk of finances owing on that leadership race calendar. You pay your dues in chunks. He said the next one was coming, and the membership sales and our fundraising just showed that we didn't have the momentum that we had hoped for. But boy, did he grab people's attention with the Lougheed comparison.
And you know what? I got to give him props, because in that leadership race, for Gil McGowan to come out in front, and I'm not knocking him, he had to do something like that. And
Totally.
to say I'm the next Lougheed, but not only that, when you hit him with, what do you and Lougheed have in common? He didn't back up
He had an answer.
into the bushes like Homer Simpson. He had an immediate answer. He had a well thought out, intelligent answer. And I agreed with what he was saying. It sounded like good policy to me as it was coming. So I give him props for being, I know the word isn't extravagant, but he was out there, man. He was trying. He gave it his all. And good for him for not afterwards wasting more people's money.
100% on all fronts. It's easy for us to take pot shots at people that take a risk, that put their neck out there, and that enter a leadership race or run in any political race. It could be a school trustee, city councilor, whatever. But it takes guts, and we applaud people that participate in the political process. I think you're right. And it also identified early on where he thought if he could get that support, where it was going to come from. And he was looking for moderates. He was looking for old school progressive conservatives. Ultimately wasn't meant to be. But hey, man, I applaud Gil for always making himself available on the show and taking those tough questions.
He was trying to immediately downplay that whole thing, like he said, that he's a radical leftist. He's like, no. And he had a great way of doing it, waving that Lougheed flag. But as we saw just a short time after that episode, he said, that's it for me.
We've heard Danielle Smith invoke Peter Lougheed. We heard Jason Kenney invoke Peter Lougheed. We heard
great
Rachel
name to
Notley
invoke.
invoke Peter Lougheed. A lot of Notley Lougheed talk back in the day. Number 8 on our list of all-time quotes, coming up to our first 1,000 episodes here on Real Talk, was back in mid-June, June 8th of 2023. Alberta at that time, and British Columbia, seeing huge wildfires. I think at that point, Johnny, about 120 of them were burning, maybe
crazy.
more than that. And Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith is with us in studio. And boy, did we and she ever get a lot of attention when we asked her about those fires. Every expert that we talk to indicates the significant factor that climate change is playing on our susceptibility to wildfire, and on the conditions that lead to these massive blazes earlier and earlier in the season. So how do you reconcile?
As I am, the number of stories about arson. And I'm very concerned that there are arsonists, and there have been stories as well that we're investigating, and we're bringing in arson investigators from outside the province. We have almost 175 fires with no known cause at the moment. Sometimes they're very easy to trace. When you have lightning storms, that's easy to trace. When you have a train easy to trace, campfire. But to have 175 fires that we don't know the cause of, that's unusual.
But the conditions that allow the fires to grow as big as that, whether or not somebody starts it, human carelessness leads to the start of the fire. The conditions under which that fire can grow to such a massive degree. We've had wildfire experts on the show telling us that arson is not a leading cause of wildfires based on the science.
Well, I would say that we have to do a better job as government in making sure that we're building fire guards, because I think that the issue that we had faced is there's a lot of communities that we know from what happened in Slave Lake and what happened in Fort McMurray, that you have to make sure that when a forest fire begins, that it doesn't jump over into a town or a city, because that's when you end up with real trouble.
First, let me say R.I.P. to those beautiful two plants. We used to call them Jim and Jam behind you.
That was our quiet ode. For the people that are watching this on YouTube, that was our quiet ode to Zach Galifianakis between two ferns. We never wanted to say it out loud, but we had those two palm trees behind me for a while.
We
used to chuckle our way through that for sure.
We've lost so many soldiers here in Ryan's green thumb discovery
We can't be held
tour.
responsible for the lives of live plants in our studio. But
anyways,
we keep it real. Real talk, real plants. When Premier Danielle Smith back in June of 2023 started talking about arson as obviously a leading concern of hers, that's immediately where she went when we asked her about those fires. It set off alarms everywhere with political commentators, with wildfire scientists, and of course with Smith's political opponents. It put a lot of attention on that episode for good reason. By the way, it sure seemed like I held her accountable on that. It sure seemed like I clapped back. It was weird because there's been some really loud critics suggesting that I never do. But let me fast forward 6 more months. Lisa Johnson reporting for Post Media, this published in the Edmonton Journal. 6 months later, on the 21st of December of that year, 2023, the ministry announcing no large wildfires that threatened Alberta communities were caused by arson. And they released some of the numbers here of a total of 1,121 wildfires that were counted as of December 5th of that year. 91 were deemed to be caused by arson, affecting a total of 262 hectares, representing about 0.01% of total affected land. Through 2023, 8.5%, 8.4 to be exact, percent of all wildfires categorized as arson, which is slightly above the previous 5-year average of 7.8%. That according to the Forestry Ministry. So there's some clarification on the numbers. Boy, did that clip ever get a lot of play, and we have it in our top 10 for that reason.
And boy, does Danielle ever need clarification a lot of times. But this is what Danielle Smith does amazing. This is what I have to give props to her for, because we know that the majority of wildfires are man-made, all right? So if you tip the scale a little with the word man-made, and then you go to, we have 175 wildfires with a question mark, and then you tip that a little more and say they're arson, I mean, are you really lying, or are you just stretching the truth? And that's what Danielle Smith does so well, because our 175 wildfires, if we break it down, a muffler sitting in some tall grass on a
Cigarettes.
hot truck or whatever, who cares? The fact is, she knows how to just tip that scale just a little and get you to think what she wants you to think. And in the end, is she actually lying, or is she just stretching that silly putty a little more to make her point come across?
Well, and even in the bigger picture, the context of that question was climate change.
Yeah.
And so when you start talking about arson as a leading cause of wildfires, what do? You diminish, and it's strategic, of course.
All the left.
You diminish the role or you diminish discussion of or focus on climate change and environmental factors. And, of course, that's what had a lot of people's goat for sure. Number 8 on our list. Number 7, about Danielle Smith, but not from Danielle Smith, one of her fiercest opponents. And, of course, this speaks to the strained relationship, and it's an intentional strain, between the provincial government in Alberta and Justin Trudeau's federal Liberal government. One of its most outspoken ministers, Federal Jobs Minister Randy Boissonnault, the Member of Parliament for Edmonton Centre and a relatively regular guest on this show, had this to say about Alberta's premier on December 7th of 2023.
When Danielle Smith goes and puts the Alberta Sovereignty Act in because of losing a battle at her own cabinet table to allow her to go to COP, she's trying to, take the attention off the fact that her renewables moratorium actually scared away $12 billion of investment from the province. And she's also trying to deflect from the really unpopular idea that she has to pull Alberta out of the CPP.
What are you talking about, this battle that she lost at her cabinet table?
So there was a battle at cabinet as to whether their government should implement the Alberta Sovereignty Act or not. And at the UCP AGM, the Take Back Alberta movement took over all of the seats on the UCP board. That means that Danielle Smith and her cabinet now have some masters to answer to. And saber rattling at the feds with the Alberta Sovereignty Act over electricity was, I'm pretty sure, her ticket to be able to go to COP. So these are the kind of forces that are at play in our province. It's not about good policy. It's about politics in her own backyard, in her own shop. And you saw what those politics did to Jason Kenney.
Ooh. When Randy Boissonnault in that interview referred to Danielle Smith as a puppet master, we went, we've got our clip. We went, whoa.
There it is.
There it is. This is obviously a political relationship. I'm talking the province and the feds with great theater and a great deal of history behind it. I mean, we talked about the legacy of Peter Lougheed earlier in this episode. What was that legacy? Well, it was battling on Alberta's behalf to the federal government of that day with a familiar face at the front of it. And so obviously strategically, the feds have an interesting position in Alberta on the oil sands, on pipelines and the like. The industry is key to the country's economic success. And at the same time, the federal government has made its priority climate action. And international investors expect notable and significant and meaningful climate action. And so herein is the crux. And the Alberta government has obviously, and in particular, conservative governments through Alberta's history, have made great hay butting head with the feds. And so when the feds butt back, it's always pretty interesting, and Randy Boissonnault's never been afraid of saying what he thinks about the Alberta government of the day.
He's one of the best. We should do a show of our top 10 favorite,
he gives us a
local
lot to work with.
Politicians or Canadian politicians, because he's one of those guys. I mean, even the way he's a great communicator, just like Danielle, and he's a great opponent of her, because he invokes those words. As soon as he says puppet master, you just envision all the strings that pull Danielle, whether it's, what's our friend there who was on the show? David
Parker.
Whether it's David Parker or whether it's, the lobbyists or whether it's big oil. When he says that word, I was like, that's the clip, because you just envision those strings pulling on her. Randy Boissonnault, one of the best, second best only to the other Randy.
The other Randy. I was just sitting here going, I wonder if Johnny's going to address the elephant in the room. And when we talk about Randy Boissonnault's communication ability, he is well spoken, but I'm not sure he's talked his way out of that alleged scandal quite yet. Cleared by the federal ethics commissioner. But if you're wondering what the hell we're talking about, just go ahead and check out our TikTok, our Instagram, our YouTube shorts for our coverage of the story of the other Randy. That probably belongs in our top 10 as well.
It does.
All right, number 6. This one's me. This was on July 9th of this year. You and I, Johnny, had not planned to be talking about healthcare. As a matter of fact, this was a little bit later on in the episode, and this has a lot of people talking still. And we're going to break this down in just a quick second, but let's set the scene. Number 6 all time. They said what? On Real Talk. You know what they told her? 18 months.
That's what I mean. A year and a half
to get an MRI. So she's paying $2,500 out of pocket to get her MRI.
But then how is that fair to people who don't have that kind of money?
Life's not fair. And I know that a premier can't say that and a health minister can't say that if they want to stay employed, if they want to keep their job.
Sure.
But life is not fair. It's not fair that not every family gets to own a fifth wheel. It's not fair that not every family gets to go to Disneyland. It's not fair that not every family eats nutritious meals. Life's not fair. I don't believe that everyone should be beholden to big ass long wait lists just because it doesn't make sense to me. And I do think that if you can open up alternative delivery models, I do think if you can open up alternative options, you will attract more staff, you'll attract more professionals, you'll attract more talent, you'll attract more investment.
If you think someone's going to just come in, wave a magic wand, throw a bunch of money, build a bunch of hospitals, everyone's fine, it's not going to happen. But we do need to start getting on track right now.
Life's not fair.
That's gonna be a quote that kind of hangs over you for a while.
Yeah, it kind of is. It's kind of following me around a little bit. And this one, I think, is it safe to say that when we were having the conversation, and I knew because I alluded to it, I said no health minister will say this, no premier would ever say this. So we knew that it was going to get people's attention, but I underestimated the impact that it would have and the magnitude with which it would land. And what I mean by that is we took a relatively lengthy, off-the-cuff conversation, you and me, more than 20 minutes, I think, and boiled it down to 60 seconds to fit into a YouTube short.
And that could be dangerous.
And to be honest, in retrospect, because I look at the commentary now by a lot of sort of like unofficial, I don't mean by unofficial, but like accounts on Twitter, random accounts, anonymous accounts. There's a lot of blowback from those accounts, but then there's some analysis and some coverage of the comment and some commentary on the comment from some pretty notable people. And what we realized through this and what I regret through this is that we take our YouTube shorts, we take our posts on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and everywhere else and hope that they will drive interest and drive people to the full episode, to the full discussion.
The full show. That's what we ask you to do.
And a lot of this commentary that's come out, Jesperson thinks that if you just need an MRI, you should go buy one. Jesperson thinks that poor people or people that aren't as well off shouldn't have equitable access to health care. Jesperson thinks that if you're rich, if you're wealthy, if you're a member of the 1%, that you don't have to worry about health care because screw everybody else, and this can be a pay-to-play type system. That's not the spirit of the message. That's not what the message was, but the way that I condensed that conversation down to 60 seconds left some people who didn't watch the full episode with the impression that I honestly regret, because that's not what I was saying in the conversation, and it's safe to say that one kind of blew up in our face a little bit.
But if you had watched the full episode, you would have got that, and you're right. Maybe that's a learning lesson for us. I knew when we made the clip, specifically when you came back from me and you said life isn't fair, I'm like, oh, that's a quick cut. That's got some gravel to it, some salt. It scrapes me, and we put it out anyways. And that's the exact little line from everything. Life isn't fair that everyone who is giving this commentary that you said is saying. So maybe that's on us. Maybe we need to make our clips a little less grainy, grimy, and abrasive like that. But it's another thing we just have to say in the video, and we try to every time. Please watch the whole video. I don't think anyone's life or anyone's opinion should be boiled down to 60 seconds. I know that's the exact life we're living in right now. Everything's on social media.
20 seconds if you're lucky.
20, 30, 40, 50 seconds. But please watch the full conversation. And I know this is a conversation, and I know you do too, that isn't over. We're going to have people who gave commentary on the show. We're going to be talking about this for the next 6 months to a year.
And we've talked a lot about healthcare. We've talked a ton about healthcare. We've talked a lot about reliable access to healthcare for every Canadian.
We've talked about that exact topic, about paying for MRIs and everything so many times. And this time is the one time it hit with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is life isn't fair. And the fact of the matter is a lot of people are being put in tough scenarios, tough situations where they're on high-powered prescription drugs, high-powered opioids, because they're living in incredible pain, waiting for hip and knee replacements and other surgeries. There's cancer surgeries that are being delayed. We saw a note from somebody, sent it to us privately the other day, letting us know that a loved one of theirs has had their brain tumor surgery delayed. Can you imagine living with that? And there are people, some of them wealthy, some of them not, a lot of folks that are average, ordinary folks, public servants, that are, cashing in RSPs, that are second mortgaging their home, that are crowdfunding, that are doing everything that they can because they're desperate to get medical services before it's too late. And a lot of times that's before the Canadian healthcare system, or in our context, the Alberta healthcare system, can deliver. And so these people are finding themselves in desperate situations where they've got to do, and they are doing everything that they can. Now, life isn't fair, and there's nothing inaccurate about that phrase. But when you throw it out right after someone says, what about people that can't afford it? Talking about healthcare, it comes across as quite brash and a little bit, like you said, abrasive and salty. And so that's why we have this on the top 10 list, but it's not number one.
No, and before we end that, I do want to say that we were talking specifically about people we care about, people we love, and people that, I will say this, are not rich, but people that, one person specifically close to me, that if I had the money for an MRI and that was the way they needed to get it because they were in pain, because they had something wrong with them, they had question marks everywhere, and the cancer, obviously, cloud is over everyone these days, I would try to rustle up the money. I would try to do it. We were not saying, and I don't think you were either, that rich people should cut in line.
Of course not. And but again, the fact of the matter is that some people are leaving and some people are forced to stay and wait. That's just a fact of life, and we need to acknowledge that in the conversation. You know what I thought was interesting, and I said this to a buddy. I said when I'm talking, I won't say who it was that I was describing, that somebody very close to me that paid out of pocket that $2,500 for the MRI that she needed because they had quoted her, not quoted, but you know what I mean. They'd scheduled her 18 months. She was going to wait for this MRI. She was desperate. She needed to know for peace of mind whether there was a neurological condition at play or not. She is not a high income earner, and she went and she paid that $2,500. And we've seen some blowback on social media platforms like TikTok. People saying, "Oh, Jesperson just thinks you should go and get your MRI. You should just go pay for your MRI and forget about the people that can't." I'm sitting there going, listen, it is unbelievable to me that somebody like this person, who I know personally, had to scrape together and find a way to get $2,500 to pay for this MRI, and people are more outraged by me mentioning that anecdote than they are by the fact that Albertans or Canadians are waiting 18 months for MRIs. That's something that should be unacceptable to everybody, and one reason of many why we should demand more from our healthcare system. I want to say this on the record, and we've said it several times on the show since. This show supports healthcare workers, and there is no doubt about that, and an indictment of the system is not an indictment of the frontline staff like the doctors, nurses, the EMTs, the porters, the caretakers, and everybody else that's involved in the system. That is number 6 on our They Said What episode, a very special episode edition of Real Talk. We've got the top 5 coming up. Some folks are probably going to suggest Life's Not Fair should be in the top 5.
If you thought Life's Not Fair was, it's going to be a rocky ride from here on out.
We got 5 more to come. This episode is happening with the support of our friends at Athabasca University. That's Canada's open university. And if you're thinking of heading back to school right now, maybe it's for job reasons, maybe it's for personal improvement reasons, maybe you've just always had that plan, but there's always been barriers, there's always been hurdles. Find out why tens of thousands of Canadians have looked to Athabasca U, because the barriers are gone. You can open your options with the online offerings at Athabasca University, and the alumni testimonials are unbelievable. More than 50,000 alumni from over 100 countries. 92% of them say they're in a job related to their field of study. Select your path today by visiting athabascau.ca. If you're looking to get your life organized, if you're looking to finally get decluttered and be proud of the space you call home, it might be time to request a free consultation at californiaclosets.ca. Nobody does custom storage solutions quite like California Closets, and we're talking about the entire home. It could be your custom closet, the wardrobe you've always dreamed of, maybe an entertainment center that brings the family together. Maybe it's your garage that could use an overhaul. Whatever it is, California Closets has you covered, and it starts with that free consultation at californiaclosets.ca. At Complete Care Restoration, they have been restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind for more than a quarter century. And as we see our fellow Canadians, including right here in our home province of Alberta, displaced, evacuated by wildfire, some of you impacted by floods, we hear of sewer backups. Sometimes it's black mold or asbestos discovered during a renovation project. We recommend the team that is ready to respond 24/7 with trained and certified personnel. You can contact them anytime at CompleteCareRestoration.ca. Friesen Brothers, for coming up on 70 years. Alberta grown, Alberta owned. Families always come first at Friesen Brothers, and that's why we recommend you check out their Family Essentials flyer on their website at friesen.com. That's FRESON.com. They know that every family's busy, and that's why they've developed their range of family essentials to help you save on the everyday products you use the most. Don't forget, 15% off the first of every month on grocery purchases $75 or more at Friesen Brothers. And our friends at Kubi Energy are hanging the "We're Hiring" sign at all of their locations. That's Kamloops, BC, and Calgary, Edmonton, and Lethbridge, Alberta. They're doing solar installs across Western Canada, whether it's a barn, a home, a cottage, a cabin, or a skyrise downtown. Kubi is helping Canadians go green, and they do it better than anybody else, which is why they're always looking for team members. If you'd like to help Kubi grow clean energy in Canada, you can apply today by visiting the careers link at kubienergy.ca. On this special episode of Real Talk, They Said What? We're taking a look at the top 10 most newsworthy moments occurring during casual conversation or interviews right here on the show. And that includes December 18th of 2023. This has always been a tough story to talk about ever since the Humboldt Broncos bus crashed en route to a game, hitting a truck driven by Jaskrat Singh Sidhu, who pleaded guilty to all charges related to that horrific tragedy. We were talking to Charles Adler, our regular guest, the first episode of every week, as Jaskrat Singh Sidhu was looking at deportation. Fast forward to present day, and that's exactly what's happening. But we asked Chuck what he would do if he was calling the shots.
You break the law and you kill our people. I want you to the hell out of here. And if there was a way to have him deported sooner and have him serve his sentence in India, I would have been totally fine with that.
Yeah, I don't agree with you. And if he was impaired during the crash, maybe it would have been different. If there was malice, I would feel different. If it was a shooting spree, if he stabbed people, and people are saying in our chat, I think it was Seventh Pilot, someone said, if you run a stop sign, it's not an accident. I know people don't like the word accident. Let's call it a crash. He caused the crash. He's told the courts he was distracted by a flapping tarp. But I just don't. I feel like he did his time. Nothing is going to bring the boys back. I want to say that I'm not going to name the families, but I'm personal friends with two of the fathers who lost boys in that crash. I know for sure one of them wants him gone. I haven't talked to the other about I've not shared my perspective with them personally because I'm staying in my lane on that one. But I don't know. It doesn't seem like the right move. He didn't go out and intentionally murder people. I think that deportation, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it fits.
It's not an accident. It is a crash. He blew a stop sign. He was obviously driving a cargo that had the opportunity to kill people, which is exactly what happened. And I'm not as fortunate as you to have an unlimited amount of compassion in this situation. That's not me taking a shot at you. I'm here to say that you're probably a better human being than I am. I'm a flawed human being, and all my compassion goes to those kids and their parents and their sisters and their brothers and their families.
That was Charles Adler on December 18th of 2023. That was and remains a tough conversation to have. Mm-hmm. It struck me when he said, like you, I don't have an unlimited amount of compassion. And I certainly don't have an unlimited amount of compassion. But it always just felt to me, and it still feels to me, despite the fact that, and like we said, as of late May of 2024, that board tasked with making this decision did order the deportation for Jaskrat Singh Sidhu for obviously the role that he played in causing that Humboldt Broncos crash. But an interesting walk back.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
Charles. The
one thing about this one, top moment is that he flipped. He didn't, not fully flipped, but he changed his tune on a lot of things and came to kind of your side of the camp later. And that's a great episode that people should go back and watch as well, because I think this kind of shows us how passionate and how upset people get when we discuss the Humboldt Broncos crash. People just get very upset, and they say exactly what they're thinking at the time. And Charles took some time to think about it, and he came back later on the show and said, you know what? I don't really agree with that Charles from that point in time.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it also speaks to the community that we have here on Real Talk and our audience members and the value of feedback that people provide. And I'm not talking about like trolls, throwing bombs on Twitter and like the F-bombs and all the criticism like that. I mean, Chuck's seen it all in his day as a talk radio host for sure. But I think I saw a lot of, on the heels of that and in the days and the weeks following that candid comment of his, really informed and almost like empathetic comments from people. We always say on the show, we seek to understand. People that were seeking to understand Charles' perspective or that did, but were meeting him, that were kind of meeting him in the middle and saying, here's why I feel the way I do. We got a ton of emails, and I'm talking about people saying that to him on Twitter. We had comments, obviously, on YouTube on the show. We always appreciate that. And then quite a few emails that we did read.
And he heard and looked at all the comments. He soaked it all up, right?
And for like a veteran talk host like that, like Chuck, who's had, a national and a nationally syndicated show for many, many years, walking something back is not a publicity stunt.
Easy.
It's not something that you see often.
No.
A lot of times commentators, including me, I oftentimes in periods of self-reflection, in quiet self-reflection, we just talked about one a couple of quotes ago, the last quote we just talked about, where I've had moments, do I need to walk this back? Like, do I actually believe the words that I'm saying there after hearing from the public, after hearing from audience members? They care just as deeply about the stuff we're talking about as we do, and in many circumstances care more and have more experience than we do, walking miles in these shoes. The power of that feedback to this show is immeasurable, and we're really grateful for it.
And this situation especially, it's there's never going to be an opinion that makes everyone happy. You've got parents who want him gone, parents that want him to stay. You've got parents who've forgiven him. You've got parents that said they will never forgive him.
Yeah.
So I just think it's great that Charles took the time to listen to everyone and to soak it all in. And he didn't 180 flip on it, but he had a moment of clarity where he said, you know what, that's not how I feel now. That's how I felt in that moment. And that's just indicative of everything going on in the world right now. We need to all stop and just, when we're foaming at the mouth, stop and listen to what other people have to say, no matter what they have to say and no matter what their opinion is, even if it's exactly the opposite of yours.
Yeah, and it can be easier said than done, but I
of course.
totally agree with you. I totally agree with you.
But we have to do it. We have to.
For sure. I mean, it's that whole idea of like the family dinner table or like that family Thanksgiving table where you're going to run into that one uncle that's going to have the
but you don't rip his head off.
Grossly different than yours, but you want to find a way to be able to stay at the table and break bread together. And a big part of that is seeking to understand one another. Yeah. Oh, we love Charles, and he adds so much to this talk show. Top 4 now, our number 4 moment all time to this point anyway. This is one that had a big effect on politics, in particular in the city of Calgary. But this was a moment exclusively on Real Talk that made waves across the country. It was October 19th of 2021. It was the morning after Amarjeet Sohi had become the mayor of Edmonton and Dr. Jyoti Gondek had been elected as the mayor of Calgary. And both of them, the mayors-elect, joined us exclusively on Real Talk. And I asked Mayor Gondek an obvious question with no idea how she was going to respond. So first order of business, I asked Mayor-elect Sohi the same thing. Not like a sort of a nice phone call or something. I'm talking about something you're going to sink your teeth into, something that is Mayor-elect Gondek's top priority. What's going to be the first thing across your desk?
We have had the opportunity to declare climate emergency for years. We have had various documents presented to us as a council, and I think we've had more than enough time to review them. So let's get serious. Let's declare this, and let's start going after some of the capital that we will see flow in once we make a bold move like that.
It is a bold move, and I don't have to tell you about how even a phrase like climate emergency can ripple through a downtown core. Do you have to find a balance as the mayor of a city that's seen itself flourish because of oil and gas revenue? Do you have to be careful about the words you use, or are we past that? Do people misunderstand where Calgary and business leaders are at right now?
I don't believe that talking about a climate emergency and oil and gas are mutually exclusive ideas. I think, as a matter of fact, we've forgotten what we're good at. We are very good at energy production, and we are also leaders in innovative ways to practice energy production. We became fixated on that end product being oil and gas. So let's move past the outputs and start talking about the processes again. And let's put ourselves on the map as a city that is the absolute leader in a transitioning economy. And let's show the world that by using innovation and technology, we can come up with sustainable, greener, cleaner solutions across all of our business sectors. That's the kind of message we need to set. We don't need to be hung up on what it is we're producing. Let's talk about the ways that we get there.
I don't disagree with what Mayor Gondek says in answering that question.
Yeah.
But when she said declaring a climate emergency was her number one order of business, honestly, I felt like you could hear the screeching of tires across the province. That was a huge moment, early, very early. She hadn't even sworn in yet.
But the point is, if you're going to declare a climate emergency in Calgary or Edmonton or the whole province, you might as well declare it everywhere on Earth. So there's no reason to do it in the first place. We are in a climate emergency everywhere. It's getting hotter. The oceans are full of plastic. I mean, you could go back on all our shows about the environment, and you could cry your face into the pillow with all the shows we've had about people who are saying everything is bad. The water is bad. The air is bad. The temperature is bad. I mean, the animals disappearing is bad. So that was the one problem I had with this. I was like, I get the thought and the feeling that went into this, but in the end, we should be declaring it everywhere. So don't just declare it in one place. And I don't know how. I love Jody every time she's on, but I don't know how she thought this would play positively for her.
And I think it was just a candid moment. I think she was, she was just brand new. She won the election. Mm-hmm. She was probably like, I don't know what I'm not going to say. I just about applied how I would celebrate becoming the mayor of a city with how she maybe celebrated, and that might be different.
Would you be wearing a cowboy hat and a belt buckle the size of
I might be doing all my interviews from a horse, just in the saddle, doing the interviews. Point your cameras up, everybody. But in all seriousness, and we knew, and it was the episode did very well downloads-wise, and that was because some very loud and prominent, in particular conservative voices across the country, not just in Calgary, not just in Alberta, latched onto this and started sharing this interview and said, you're not going to believe what we're hearing outside of Calgary right now. What made it even more difficult, I think, for Mayor Gondek, and this is a story that holds true to right now as we're talking, her popularity has suffered with the public perception and the reality that she is a progressive mayor, so to speak. And during an affordability crisis, as people have seen cost of living increase and the cost of borrowing increase and household expenses increase and everything else, polling shows that Canadians, including Calgarians, the reality of what's happening with our climate has not changed, but the place or the priority that people put on the climate emergency
has gone
as
down.
one of their top political priorities has gone down.
I can see that.
And the affordability crisis is now number one. And so her critics have effectively hammered away at the mayor, including because of this quote that was delivered exclusively on Real Talk.
And I can see it. And that's the catch-22 right now with affordability everywhere. If someone said to you, hey, we're going to release X amount of CO2 extra into the atmosphere, but your kids will be able to afford college.
Yeah.
What are you going to pick?
You know it's not a choice that anybody wants to make. Hey, we're going to keep having these tough conversations on the show. We promise you that. All right, number 3 on a very special They Said What episode of Real Talk. We look back to January 19th of 2021. We're talking to Mayor Craig Snodgrass out of High River, Alberta. Beautiful town just south of Calgary. And he starts going on the record talking to us about how he voted, or in particular, how he didn't vote in 2019 in the Alberta provincial election. And the reason that he gave us made waves across the country.
I'll be straight up with you. I did not vote for Jason Kenney at the last election. I voted NDP because of the candidate that we had down here. I believed he was the right person. And I did not vote for Jason Kenney because at the time, in my opinion, he was just full of shit through that whole election and the false promises and the things he was promising people that you actually don't have control to do that. And so, I'll be straight up with that. Yeah, it was embarrassing at the time. I had people creep in the house, taking pictures, posting them to Facebook, how dared the mayor. But,
Wait. What? Whoa. What?
Say what?
People were taking, what were they doing? People were taking photos of your house and posting them?
Oh, yeah. Because my wife's big NDP. She's a nurse. She's a lover of the environment and everything. She's just that's her gig, right?
Okay, but what were the people saying? What was the purpose of posting where your house is?
To shame me about voting NDP.
Oh, wow.
100%. And that's whatever. I gave the guy shit and we had a chat about it. And he's still on my arse. You can watch him on Facebook right now. Yeah. Coming at me, whatever. We're having fun now, but that's totally okay. But that's the problem, right? Is that, he's made so many false promises to this problem. Now he's got himself backed in a corner. He's had no success in getting the energy industry going. They are desperate. And when you are desperate and you're backed into a corner, you make very dumb decisions and you start making mistakes. And that's what exactly this is. It's a mistake. And the rightful thing to do is admit to that mistake and do the honorable thing in reinstating that coal policy and start to speak to the people of Alberta and get it back in place. And we can, if there's adjustments that need to be made, let's talk about them as a province and move forward from there.
Isn't it a beautiful thing when a politician tells you how they really feel?
I thought you were going to say, isn't it a beautiful thing when we can count the number of times on this show someone has said Kenny is full of shit?
Yeah, that was, and you look at the dates, that's January 19th of 2021, then Premier Kenny resigning 16 months later.
There you go.
In May of 2022. Mm-hmm. Snodgrass, though, man, God bless small town mayors.
Right.
Talking to us about a guy who posts photos of his home online. Jeez. And then he goes, I gave the guy shit. He's still up my arse. You can see it all on Facebook. What? That was fantastic. And a lot of people, I remember I even look at my tweet from that day when he said it. I go, High River Mayor Snod ain't tipsy-toeing in the tulips on today's Real Talk RJ. And that was one for the ages.
And that's one from the farthest back, but we had to include it just because it's so epic, right?
People were turning it into
like a 180.
GIF.
You're like, whoa, wait, what?
Wait, what?
There's a guy?
What's going on right now?
And that's, just so listeners know, that's not the first time we've been told by someone or an elected official that people do this a lot nowadays. They don't do anything. They don't try to assault you. They just sit outside and intimidate. They sit outside in their car, and watch your house.
Outside
take
the
photos
private
of your house.
residence of politicians
take photos of you taking out the garbage. It's really scary stuff.
Really, and then they go pick up your recycling bags and take them home and sort through them, looking
sort
for the
through
dirt.
your taxes.
Make sure you number one, file your taxes. Number two, redact
Shred.
all your personal documents, and number three, shred, baby, shred. That's kind of been part of Kenny's tenure, I think, as Alberta Premier for a while. If you Google it, you'll see what I'm talking about. I digress. Number two, all-time, noteworthy, newsworthy, stop the press moment right here on Real Talk occurred on February 21st of 2024. The Right Honorable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, joins us in the Real Talk studio and picks a fight with the Alberta government and big oil.
Governments should get out of the way of Albertans actually innovating and creating that better future that they can work and build and deliver. If you can build a pipeline for oil sands oil, you can build a pipeline for hydrogen. If you can build the technology necessary for an oil sands refinery, you can build the technology necessary for a hydrogen plant. These are things that Albertans will have great jobs in the future if the Alberta government gets out of its ideological opposition to doing things that are good for workers, good for the planet, maybe not good for classic oil sands companies, except that they're also investing massively in decarbonization and renewables. This is the dynamic that, quite frankly, Albertans are getting fooled by right-wing politicians on.
I can already hear Premier Smith's response to this and the oil companies' CEOs' responses to this. And they're going to say, did Justin Trudeau just tell us that government ideology needs to get out of the way of innovation in the oil sands? And I know that they're going to tear their hair out because
absolutely.
They feel that it's you that's been imposing liberal ideology onto the oil sands.
So what have we imposed on the oil sands?
You know what? We got literally dozens, if not hundreds of questions people wanted us to ask you. And a lot of people working in traditional oil and gas still don't believe. As much as you pound on this table, as much as you talk about the personal political risk that you took investing in TMX, they don't feel like you've had the industry's back. They don't feel like you've had Alberta's back. And I don't
think the oil industry has had the back of the oil sands workers. I don't think the industry, by dragging its heels on decarbonization in some sectors, some of the oil sands companies have been really innovative and are leading the way on that, and that is great. And we are encouraging them, and we're investing with them, and we're supporting them in decarbonization investments. But those who are crossing their hands and saying, you know what, the world's still going to need oil for another decade or so, another few decades. It's still going to need every drop that we can produce. So why would we raise our costs right now and invest in innovation when we can just do the same things we've been doing for decades and make profits? And the fact that we're going to leave people with a dirty mess and no jobs because we haven't prepared for the jobs of the future, well, that's a problem for the next generation in this community. My job as a company, as a shareholder, is to draw profits out right now. That is what is hurting oil sands workers, and they've been fooled by people who are saying, oh, no, the climate change is a liberal or a Chinese plot. You don't have to worry about it. Just keep doing things exactly as they were a decade ago, 2 decades ago. That's not preparing for the future that Albertans, like all Canadians, know is changing.
Wow.
That's the only interview that the Prime Minister did during that visit to Alberta. Albertans are getting fooled by right-wing politicians, and the oil industry has not had the back of its workers.
I mean, I'm getting goosebumps again, and I'm not even a huge Trudeau supporter, but I know one thing's for sure. He needs to do more podcasts. I didn't hear an a walk back. He was passionate. He was a little fired up. He was he was angry. He was articulate. He was intelligent. I agreed with what he was saying, and I haven't heard anything like that from our Prime Minister in a decade. What is going on when we're reliving that? If you guys were here, I'm talking to listeners now in the studio, our jaws were on the floor. The people behind us were, I'm surprised applause didn't erupt after. It was one of the best things I've ever heard him say, and I was like, damn, I agree with you.
I don't remember, I think that, that interview, and we pulled back the curtain to tell people about how that went. We did not supply the Prime Minister's office with questions ahead of time, anything like that, but they had let us know that we had 12 minutes with the Prime Minister, and that interview, I think, wound up being 36 minutes at his discretion, at his call, because he wanted to continue to take those questions and speak directly to a Western Canadian audience, and he did that. Obviously, the backlash from those, or the pushback on those comments, in particular, Albertans being fooled by right-wing politicians. Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith tweeted about it. We heard about it from the federal Conservatives. We saw a lot of pushback from people working in oil and gas on the white-collar and the blue-collar side of the industry, and of course had some great follow-up conversations on the show following that exclusive with the Prime Minister on February 21st of 2024. You can find that full episode, the full interview, on our YouTube channel, and of course wherever you get your podcasts. The most notable, the most newsworthy comment to this point in the history of Real Talk occurred on October 19th of 2023, just a couple of weeks after Hamas conducted a widespread and devastating terror attack on Israel. Israel obviously responding with a great deal of force, and we've debated and discussed the magnitude of that retaliation on this show. It's something that we will continue to talk about. But it was an interview with Ghada Sasa that really grabbed not only our attention, but everybody who heard her make a pretty remarkable claim during that interview.
This just speaks to the racism of Israeli society and its militarization, right? And I also want to be very careful around media, right? Because media has been saying, oh, Hamas has been beheading people, they've been raping women. And then, they had to retract their statements and being like, actually, there's no proof of that. We saw Biden arguing that he saw photos like, actually, that was a lie. And even about the rave, I was reading about the rave, and I was reading a lot of the people who were killed were actually killed by Israel. Like, I was reading accounts from like the Israelis who were at the rave saying like, yeah, Hamas was not trying to kill us, and then the Israelis were just firing at us. And even you mentioned now what's happening in the US, like hundreds of Jews were protesting yesterday in Congress against Israel's crimes against Palestine, saying not in our name. Israel, Jewish Voice for Peace was a huge organizer in the US, and they are anti-Zionist, right? They do recognize that settler colonialism is like not in our religion, and we stand with the people of Palestine. And the US responded yesterday by arresting hundreds of them. So that just shows, like, are they actually interested in protecting Jewish people, or are they just interested in supporting Israel as like an imperialist settler colonial regime in the Middle East that is, it's not just eliminates Palestinians, but also regularly aggresses against the surrounding countries.
Yeah, I want to say, just on the record, I've not seen anywhere any allegation, and maybe you can share those with us. We'll be happy to look into it, that Israeli forces killed anybody at the music festival. I haven't seen that anywhere. And I'm referencing right now the Poynter Institute, CBS News, CNN, major American reporting outlets, the AP, the CP. So I haven't seen that. I want to make sure I note that. Obviously, there's a big audience response to your appearance right now. We're talking to Ghada Sasa, a board member of the Canadians for Peace and Justice in the Middle East. Michael just wants me to ask you point blank, do you believe that Israel has a right to exist?
In regards to the rave, I just wanted to point, the article that I consulted was Electronic Intifada. Okay. You can look into that. I think we know that the mainstream media is extremely complicit. What can I say? CBC News, just a couple of years ago, they, an anchor just said the word Palestine, and they made him apologize for saying the word Palestine.
Who was that?
These are extremely... I can't remember who's the anchor, but it was a well-known thing at the time, and we protested in response outside the CBC building in Toronto. Even, CTV, again, casting doubt over who bombed the hospital. Well, Doctors Without Borders have said Israel bombed the hospital. The church that owns the hospital said Israel bombed the hospital. Palestinians on the ground are telling us. And we've seen Israel report things, lie about their atrocities. And we've seen media just accept it, again, accepting the beheading of children and the rape of women without actually looking at, Shireen Abu Akleh, at first they argued that, Palestinians were the ones who killed her, right? And then it was found that the video was actually their explanation was full of holes. And then we found out actually Israel, it was confirmed, like they did assassinate her. So I think, again, just just not trusting Palestinians and just trusting the white supremacist state of Israel speaks to the white supremacy of Western media. And it makes sense why Britain and the US and Canada, as occupier countries, would support a country like Israel.
That interview with Ghada Sasa on October 19th of 2023, obviously the heaviest subject matter, and in kind of not a scenario that we've never seen before, but it's certainly rare. There was a lot of outrage around that interview, but coming from different perspectives. Like, some people were outraged about what she was saying and what she was alleging. People were outraged that we had her on the show. To that I will simply say we don't know what someone's going to say until they say it. But then also people were upset with my cynicism around what she was talking about, me asking her to cite her sources on those stories. And then, of course, we had some critics, in particular from some notable Jewish organizations in Canada, who were sharing that interview, saying that I didn't push hard enough to dig into those sources. Now, we months later, in July of this year, of 2024, Al Jazeera reported on the Israeli army's use of what's known as the Hannibal Directive. during the October 7th Hamas attack. It's a controversial policy of Israel's military aimed at preventing the capture of its soldiers. And essentially, in layperson's terms, what it does is command Israeli soldiers to prevent capture of fellow soldiers by enemy forces at any cost. In other words, to kill those soldiers and their captors. And the newspaper that cites this, Haaretz, which is an Israeli newspaper, based on testimony of Israeli soldiers and senior officers, army officers, said that during Hamas's unprecedented attack on October 7th, that the Israeli army started making decisions with limited and unverified information, issuing that order that not a single vehicle could return to Gaza. And it goes on to report that was not aware, the newspaper, Israeli newspaper Haaretz was not aware how many soldiers and civilians were hit due to the Hannibal military procedure, but confirms that many of the kidnapped people would have been put at risk. It says that the Hannibal protocol was employed at 3 army facilities infiltrated by Hamas, but it did not prevent the kidnapping of 7 soldiers, the killing of 15 other spotters, and the killing of 38 soldiers. Now, a French outlet known as France 24 has a segment known as Truth or Fake, where they fact-check reports from media outlets around the world, in particular reports that are being shared and seeing traction on social media. And on the 13th of November of 2023, they released an episode of Truth or Fake vetting this story. And France 24 found that the Israeli army did not fire on its own civilians at the Nova Music Festival. That has not stopped feedback from hitting our show about this interview. The feedback still continues to arrive, obviously, as this continues to be a situation that has eyes on it around the world. I think that Ghada Sasa was coming at this from a point of earnest, from a point of sincerity, obviously with very strong convictions, which we value on this show. Candidly, she was not happy with her appearance on the show, and she said as much in some social media posts after the fact. And that was one based on public reaction that had us placing that episode, the October 19th episode from 2023, as number 1 on the most noteworthy, newsworthy moments occurring during interviews right here on Real Talk.
But just noteworthy for us. In our situation, I mean, other than just stopping the show, what could you have done other than question what she was saying, right? And it's a no-win situation for a host. So I felt for you in this situation. I mean, as it was happening, my jaw was on the, I've said this twice about the Trudeau thing, and now this, my jaw was on the ground when she made those allegations. I'm scrolling over social media, over news outlets, looking to verify what she's saying. And it was just, as this whole topic is, it makes everyone angry, everyone passionate. And for you, that seat had never been hotter. Yeah, hey, this is what comes with the territory. And as we continue to live stream our episodes every weekday at 8:30 Mountain Time, at 10:30 Eastern on YouTube and on the Mixlr audio app presented by California Closets, we invite you to join us. You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And if you believe, maybe you're a longtime Real Talk audience member, that we missed one. We missed a moment that caused you to stop in your tracks and say, they said what? Let us know. Send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, and that is unscripted talk about what matters most to Canadians like us and you. You can find out more about the show by visiting ryanjesperson.com. That's where you can sign up for exclusive benefits by supporting us on Patreon and access all of our archives, including the 10 must-watch episodes that we've just highlighted. Thanks for being a friend of the show. Thanks for sharing this episode, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.